an amazing guest today, Blake Woods. Thanks for joining us to understand which fork to use.
Oh, thank you, Tansley. I've always wanted to be on one of your podcasts, and what a compliment to be able to say one of your podcasts. But I think this is the perfect one for me. So excited to dive in.
This is amazing. You have had an amazing career and you had some really cool opportunities early on. When you think about different roles, maybe just even your first day, what advice would you give for someone who's early in their career, really wants to stand out, make an impression?
Yeah. So my first day, one of my first tasks, I was asked to fax something to one of our vendors, and I had no clue how to use the fax machine. So I actually went into the copy room, closed the door, called my mom. She talked me through it. So I think the first thing is it's okay to not know how to do something. And looking back now, I would have told myself just ask someone, right? That's so important. I think we go into these first jobs thinking we need to have it all figured out, and the learning curve can be steep, and it's okay to ask those questions.
I love that. Well, having someone to phone a friend with matters. Outside of your mom, who are some of the other people that have been helpful when you needed to ask somebody a question that you weren't sure who to ask?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think early on it was some of my college roommates. We were all trying to navigate some of these things together. So funny, you'd go to these office jobs and then, take the bus back to our house and try to, I'd complain about the fax machine. They would not understand why you had to dial nine to get an outside line. I'm dating myself for some of your audience. They'll have no idea what I'm talking about, but that was huge resource for me early on. And as I got into my career, I really started to become involved with different YP networks, both within my state and nationally. And that became a huge resource as well. A group of folks that I could always draw upon.
That makes sense. When you're going into an environment, whether it's your first job or your third job, like how do you think about making a strong impression and introducing yourself to people that you don't know?
Yeah, this is something I talk with young people about regularly. And whether you're starting at a small company like I did, or a big one, it can feel like you're kind of just in the shuffle, right? And one thing I've always said is be really intentional about what you're strong at and where you want to grow. I think sometimes there's a thought that we just get into our job, we don't want to make any waves, and we'll just do what we're asked to do. I've always found success, Tansley, by being very clear about what it is I'd like to learn more about, where I have passion. And, a lot of times as leaders, Tansley, we're maybe looking for someone to step up on a project team, or we're looking for someone to, bring to that conference. And if someone doesn't express that interest to me, I'll never maybe know to think of them. So I really think that intentionality is huge.
That makes sense. When you're starting a new role, I remember feeling very unsettled. Do you remember how long that unsettled feeling goes on? And what are some of the things that you've done to feel more a part of the team earlier days?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this can depend on the role too. One example, when I went to go work for TransUnion, the credit bureau, I had like no lending experience, and essentially that shop is a data provider for lenders at its core. Yeah, we did lots of other things there, but that was the core of the business, and I knew very little about it. And so it was months before I started to feel confident in sales meetings or on the phone with different credit union leaders. But one thing I tried to do early on is just grasp what I knew how to do. I knew how to read a call report. I knew how to understand whether a credit union was growing, whether or not they were growing lending specifically. So just latching onto those things that you can do well and being a sponge with others in the room who can help you fill in those gaps.
One of the things that we say to people when they come to Community Financial and they're going through their new hire journey is there's this moment in time where you see the organization through very fresh eyes, and we really welcome that. How do you think about sharing ideas in those early days that it will be well received and not seen as a threat or as overstepping?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think it's our job as well to set people up for success. On day one, we do an innovation workshop with our new employees, and that's really intentional because they do bring that fresh perspective. But if I'm going to suspect that someone from who's never worked in financial services is going to completely overhaul, our checking program, for instance, probably not setting them up for success. So I think as leaders, what are those areas where we need fresh perspective and getting our new people into those roles. And then as a new employee, I think sometimes we can get really excited about our idea and express it with great confidence. I think it's better to maybe come at it with curiosity.
Hmm.
Like I'm wondering why we do this. I think sometimes I did this myself as a young person. I would say things were stupid or they didn't make sense. And little did I know there was a vendor contract or a regulation or something that was driving that. You're right. There's usually like reason behind things. It doesn't mean we can't change it, but I think approaching those problems with curiosity versus maybe overconfidence will help you get those ideas to a place of action.
Makes sense. I know in any organization, we all have cultures, our homes have cultures. When you think about coming into an organization and understanding the unwritten rules, how do you gauge what those are and navigate that without the knowledge to know what people expect?
Yeah, that is going to take some trial and error. I wouldn't say I've mastered that at any point in my career, and I've worked in some really different environments along the way. If you can find that peer group early on, I always tell the new employee groups when they come through, like use each other. You might be five people from different departments, and use that as a sounding board to bounce things off. You're all navigating a new company together and I think having perspectives across an organization, which you usually have in a new hire class, is a really valuable thing. So I think that's good, but it will be clunky. There will be some trial and error there. I think if you can always, position yourself as someone who's willing to learn and someone who's not above any job, those are things that will endear you to your boss, your leader, and employer pretty quickly. So focus on those things in the early days, and it'll provide you that grace when you might need it.
Like you've had an opportunity to work in a few organizations and make a determination about when it was time to stay and when it was time to go. You know, people's tenure in organizations today is much shorter than what it might have been. Can you talk a little bit about, even on your first day, you might be thinking, well, gosh, this is just a place I'm going to stay for a little bit of time. Can you talk about your framing for how long you stay and how you start to gauge when it's the right time to think about what's next?
Yeah. So, my first role, I was an intern. I was supposed to be there 90 days, and I spent over 9 years at that company, almost a decade. And so I was very much, I went through different phases. I thought, oh, this is just something I'm going to do for 90 days to, I'll be at this company for the rest of my life, and it's okay to change your mind on that. I really look at it as, where can I grow? And for me, I made that mention to jump into TransUnion. I had this huge gap in my skill set and I wanted to fill it. And I had an opportunity through someone I actually met through a YP network, funny as that is, to go fill it. And so I did it. So I think, if you have an end goal in mind, you can start to think about what are the skills or what are the experiences that I would need to have to achieve that end goal. And then it can make those decisions a little more clear. But I've done that 3 or 4 times in my financial services career. I wouldn't say that I've mastered that skill, but that's the framework I use is just looking at my skill set, my experience, what are my gaps, and is this an opportunity that might fill a couple of them?
How did you know the gaps existed?
From falling on my face, you know, I think that's a wonderful thing. I heard some of your previous episodes about conferences, and I think getting out and talking to other people from different organizations who do different things in the industry than you do can really show you your gaps. I can't tell you the number of times, whether it's when I went to DE or I went to GAC for the first time, and you talk to people, and I thought I knew a ton about credit unions, and really I just knew this small little corner of the world that I had mastered. And so I think having those conversations kind of helps you go, oh wow, this person knows more about this topic than I feel like I've ever heard from someone. And so how to become more like them?
Like you've had a chance to engage, as you mentioned, with a number of the communities that have grown through our movement. And I think that can be very supportive throughout your career and certainly in the early stages. Attending an event or getting to know a group initially is one thing. Can you talk a little bit about how you sustain those relationships and what you think it takes to have that be an ongoing support of your career?
Yeah, I had this like decision point in my career. I had an opportunity to crash the GAC, so going to DA or DC, biggest credit union conference. It was a amazing experience. We got back and I had been gone for a week and I had so much work piled up and there was some after event communication that was going on and I think I had missed the first meeting and Teresa Holinsky at the time, who was helping run that YP group, reached out and she's like, "Do you want to stay a part of this or not?" And I'm so glad I said yes because that set a trajectory in my career where I got to become a mentor for that group, and it led to probably my involvement with other groups like I3 and the DE program. So that would be like my advice is be the one to like take action and follow up. I got lucky and I could have easily just had that be a one-time moment. The other thing I think is when you get at those events, you really have to go into it with a plan and leave it all on the field, right? My approach to those things is, I try to be in as many places as I can, meet as many people as I can, learn as much as I can, and spend as little time in the hotel room as humanly possible, and really push the limits that of possibility on that front.
When you think about a time early stage in your career where you really learned the most from a mistake, what do you think helped you to learn instead of give up?
Okay, I'll try to be quick on this, but I was a very young leader. I think at 22 or so, I became a leader. And so I got a little arrogant as I was talking about earlier. I was very confident in my skill set and the things that I could do well. And, I started to maybe opt out of different events or things that I thought were, you know, for entry level Blake, which was just Blake 6 months prior, right? And I had this executive vice president, and I saw her like probably once a week. She'd be out on this patio we had at our headquarters. And I'll try not to be gross here, but we had geese that would go in this reflecting pond, and they would unfortunately use the restroom on our patio. And I would see her out there cleaning up. And again, this is our executive vice president. She had like 80 people that worked under her. She could have easily like phoned facilities who was like her team and had them do that, but she would just go out and do it. And and I asked her, she said, we have like regulators coming in, or we've got this credit union coming in. I just don't want them to, see that. And that was like really inspiring to me. And it really made me reflect on, like how I was acting. I was nowhere near an executive vice president. And I just saw the way her team did respond when she asked them to do things. I felt like they would run through a wall for her, and they're always really highly regarded across the credit union. So that to me is just something I always say pick up the poop. It's kind of a mantra, it's those jobs that maybe no one wants to do. But if you can be the one to do those jobs that others won't, or maybe just do it without asking, you'll gain a lot of respect from not just your team but others across the credit union. That's something I reflect on 10 years later now.
That makes a ton of sense. Okay, so you've started a job, you've been there a little while, you know how to use the fax machine or today's version of such a thing. What are some of the ways that you think about expanding your network within the organization and getting to know other people outside of your responsibility unit?
Yeah, yeah. That intentionality I talked about earlier is really important. I think getting on project teams and raising your hand can be a little scary. But the way to do it, if you're feeling like you're being overlooked, is again, be persistently annoying with your leader, with everyone you meet about where your passions lie, what you're trying to learn. The other thing, too, is I think there can be a tendency to say, oh, well, I have this going on at home right now, or my softball leagues right now, so I don't want to, work late or whatever those things are. There'll always be life events in my perspective. I feel like life's been busy for me as long as I can remember. So not waiting for like that perfect time, saying yes as much as you can and positioning yourself as someone who's willing to learn on the fly. Those are great ways, I think, to expand your network and really expand your image in other people's eyes.
Like one of the things that's really interesting and is different today that I just don't feel like I even know the answers around is onboarding and being a part of an organization where you're working mostly remotely. Can you talk a little bit about the advice you'd give to people as they onboard remotely and how we do some of the things you've been talking about when you might not see people face to face as often?
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest challenges for young professionals today, and something I really spend a lot of time worrying about. For me to go into our headquarters at the time every day and, brush shoulders with our CEO or our CFO, whoever that was, it was invaluable to me. And I think even just getting some of those habits of getting up in the morning and having, my coffee and going to work were really good for me as a young person, those water cooler conversations. I was new to a company during COVID and they did a lot of those virtual happy hours and things like that. And it was a fully remote team. So those were useful to me, but I really think it is difficult to recreate some of that magic that happens, within the office. So I think, as leaders, we've got to be really mindful of that for young people, especially those who are looking to grow and advance in their careers. How are we giving them opportunities in this more remote space? I think, it really gets down to we can't just be having one-on-one meetings once a week and hoping that that's enough, right? We've got to find that extra time, those sporadic check-ins to uncover those development needs.
Okay, so you make the inevitable mistake, Blake. So something goes wrong. Then what do you do to recover?
Oh, first thing, you got to go through all those steps. So first thing I try to figure out in my head why it wasn't my fault. I exhaust every avenue. I realized no, it definitely was my fault. And I would say for young people, resist that urge, that I just expressed. I found in my career it's actually really useful to to just be transparent, look someone in the eyes and say, this is how I screwed up. This is what I was thinking. And this is how I'll change it moving forward. Tansley, I've had conversations with you like that, right? And I think that it feels a lot scarier than it really is. Even at the um, I've worked at a bunch of different organizations and I've rarely, if ever, had someone didn't respond favorably to that kind of treatment. Now, I do want to say I understand that not everyone is blessed to have the different leaders that I've had through my career. So there could be toxic situations where that wouldn't be as appreciated. But my personal experience, just taking ownership, even if you own 50% of it, I would just present it as this was my failure and this is how I'm going to get better. And that's always really well received.
All right, last question for this conversation, Blake.
Yeah.
You have committed your career to credit unions. We're so lucky that you have. When you are talking to folks that maybe haven't considered a credit union or early stage in their career, we want more young people to think about this as the place to work within our movement. What would you say about why people should think of credit unions as the employer of choice?
Yeah, I think first the cooperative principles that credit unions run on. If you're not familiar with that, I'd really encourage you to Google it. The audience I'm talking to, I know you're aware of that, but it's really an inspiring model. And I think beyond that, I would have been one of 100 people at Bank of America doing email marketing copy.
Mm.
At my job, I was very quickly, like I mentioned, a young leader running our website, all of our digital stuff, PR. I got all these really cool experiences early in my career. I got to go hike the hill and talk to legislators and speak at conferences. I feel like credit unions offer people who are looking to skill up quickly a really great place to start their career. And I've just been so impressed by this industry's support and the different networks and opportunities that exist specifically for young people. There's no better place. I was very fortunate to have landed at a credit union, and yeah, I'll be here my entire career.
Awesome. Well, we're thrilled that you are, Blake, and thanks for sharing all of your wisdom with our listeners. We'll invite you back to share more. And if you're watching us on YouTube and you've got questions for Blake, put them in there and we'll be sure to answer. Blake's got lots of gifts to share with all of us. So we're thrilled to have chatted with you today.
Thank you so much, Tansley.